One of my favorite things lately has been interacting with all of the other like-minded small business owners inside of my free online community. If you want access to free resources, tools, trainings, tons of great sales advice, and just general encouragement for your business journey, then click the link in the show notes and join myself and other small business owners inside the She Sells Differently Facebook group today. I'm taking a little bit of a podcast break during the holiday season, but that doesn't mean that you have to take a break from She Sells Differently. And I am bringing you a couple of replays of my best podcast episodes from 2024. Over the holiday season, I want you to dive into these episodes and really get excited about the upcoming new year. So I hope that you enjoy these best performing episodes from this year and get excited about what's to come in 2025. So we talked about a couple of different strategies to actually draw people to your table at the market. So talk about some of the things that you did that drew people over to your particular table.
I would say the number one most successful thing to get people over, which was your idea, and that was to do a giveaway / email sign up.
Hi, friends. Welcome to She Sells Differently, the show for aspiring women entrepreneurs looking to overcome the fear of selling and grow thriving businesses from a place of authenticity and confidence. I'm Andy Hart, and it wasn't all that long ago that I was a sales executive for a Fortune 500 company. But I knew in my heart that I was called to use my gifts for something more, something different. That's exactly why I created the She Sells Differently podcast. Each episode is going to deliver you business strategies, tools, and mindset shifts to help set you and your brand apart from our culture's expectations. It's time to elevate your sales and build a profitable, sustainable business you're proud of, one built on integrity, grace, and humility. It's time to learn how to sell differently. Welcome to the She Sells Differently podcast. I am super excited to have a special guest with us today, Mina Davenport. And Mina owns To Phōs Candles, and I'm going to ask her to introduce herself and her brand, and then we will dive right on into today's episode. We're going to do it a little bit of hot seat coaching style, but also just talking about Mina's recently wildly successful pop-up market, and I want her to just introduce herself and talk about her brand. So Mina, tell us about To Phōs Candles.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, for having me on the podcast. And I'm excited to share, especially because you have a lot to do with the success, I really think.
Thank you.
But so To Phōs Candles is a non-toxic beeswax candle company that is very fresh. I think it was officially established in the beginning of March of this year. So very new, but I started making candles a couple years ago as a way to, I had been burning candles in our home and started getting headaches and had learned that some candles just have some ingredients that can cause allergies and whatnot. And so I stopped burning them for a while, but I love the coziness of candles and what they add. And so I had read a book with some friends about liturgy. And in the book, he talks about how we can take physical things and habits that we do and apply spiritual truths to it. And he had mentioned lighting a candle and reminding us that Christ is light. And it just it was like a light bulb moment for me of, I want to do this, but I also don't want to necessarily use the candles that were giving me headaches. And so it started us on the journey of making our own candles.
And what does To Phōs stand for, actually?
Yeah, so To Phōs is Greek for the light, and that comes from John 8:12, where Jesus says that he is the light of the world. And I loved the liturgy aspect of it and wanted that to be the name of our candles.
I love that. That is beautiful. So you recently decided to branch out and do your first in-person pop-up market. And so how did you decide on this particular pop-up market? I think that's an important concept because so many people will just grab at the first pop-up market. But that's an important thing to note is how do you decide on a pop-up market? And so how did you find this one and decide to do the one that you did?
Yeah, my answer might be a tiny bit unconventional because I did a market at a local coffee shop here, literally in our backyard called Solo Coffee. And I follow them on Instagram and I had seen they posted that they were going to be doing this pop-up market. And at that point, I had just kind of started selling candles, nothing super official. And something, I don't know, I just felt this desire to showcase our candles at a community hub where, I felt like, okay, I think this would be my ideal customer, just the people here in North Raleigh. And anyway, and so I was like, you know what, that I hadn't thought about markets as being such a great strategy for getting your name out there. I was so new. But one of the prerequisites for doing the market was you had to have a tax ID. And so that's actually what kicked me into getting my LLC and getting my tax ID was in order to do this market. But retrospectively, I'm so thankful that I did because it was a very well advertised market. It was not just like one advertisement and then that's it. It was constant, who's coming to the Solo pop-up, who's coming, and, lots of hype around it that I think it was the perfect first market. Things that I would not have necessarily thought to look for were there, where now I'm like, oh, I would look for a market that is well advertised. I would look for a market that's going to have a lot of foot traffic. And I really think that's key in the success because if no one's there, you're not going to be very successful.
Yes. And I always teach my clients is make sure that you see that the market is established and that it is one that is well advertised, because that is one of the mistakes that I made on my very first pop-up market. They had never done it before, and I don't think that they advertised at all. And so, yes, that can cause you to have a very bust of a first pop-up market. So, yes. So, what steps did you take to prepare for the pop-up market, this having been your very first one?
Yeah, so I think there are two main things that really stand out as being the most helpful things that I did to prepare. One was I compiled a comprehensive list of everything that I could think of that I would need the day of. How am I going to actually sell the item? How are they going to pay for it? What things am I going to need on my table? What food am I going to need? Just very comprehensive. And I actually used ChatGPT to help me, and it was very helpful. But it kind of gave me a starting place to then work backwards from. And so I knew, okay, this is what I want the event to run like. And what are some things that I can do to get that, get to that step? So this is what I want my table to look like. What do I need to do in order to get there? So that's the first one, was just kind of having a list and working backwards. And then the second thing, which I think is honestly the most important, was asking for advice from people. And so you come first and foremost, top of my mind, because one, you have done it before. So there's something so valuable that AI can't give me. And that's like real life in-person advice. And so because you've done markets, I think you were able to give just really wise pieces of advice that didn't show up in my, little search, just ways to market and some ideas for my actual table. So that was really helpful. And then just having some other friends too, that I was able to, what do you think of my table? I had someone come over and actually do a mock setup in my basement with me. Like, okay, this is what it's going to kind of look like. And I had a few people the day of come and help me. So I think community and seeking advice was really helpful.
Yes. So we talked about a couple of different strategies to actually draw people to your table at the market. So talk about some of the things that you did that drew people over to your particular table.
I would say the number one most successful thing to get people over, which was your idea, and that was to do a giveaway slash like email sign up. And I kind of went with the way that we did our giveaway was we had 3 candles that I had set out, candles that fragrances I was thinking about launching, but wanted to kind of get some customer feedback. And I had these 3 candles laid out with a sign that said, giveaway. And people wanted to know, how do I enter this giveaway? And it was sign up for emails is one entry. So right there, you're getting people on your email list, which you can then market to. And that idea came from you, which was so priceless because now I have many more customers, maybe somebody that didn't buy that day that now is getting my emails of new products and whatnot. So anyway, that was the first entry. And the second entry was voting on which one was your favorite scent. And so I think that was so successful. One, people felt really like a part of something. They're like, oh, I get to vote on which scent is coming next. So people wanted to do that. And then, oh, I could get a free candle just by signing up and, putting my email. And it was also just a way to draw people over to the table. People that maybe were walking by, I would just kind of stop them and be like, hey, do you want to for a chance to get a free candle? And I don't think I had anybody say no. Everybody came over and wanted to smell. And even from that, I had some people who were walking by, came over to enter the giveaway and started smelling the other candles and ended up purchasing, people that would have just like walked right by. So I would say the giveaway was like the number one thing. But the other one was, I really think being friendly and standing up the whole time and being approachable was a different feel than maybe even when I've gone to markets and have seen some people just kind of sitting on a chair, maybe on their phone. It feels very unwelcoming. And so I just made it a point that I'm going to stand this whole time and I'm going to stand right next to the table and look people in the eyes and smile and say hi. And I think that made it feel more welcoming.
Yes, just being warm and authentic. And it's a tiring day at a market. Like if you think you're going to go to a pop-up market and rest, you're wrong. It is a tiring day for sure.
Yes.
So, yeah. So there's a couple things that I want to highlight that you did really, really well and that we talked about before you went to the market. And that is that so many people, they look at their sales that day at the market and they judge the success of the market simply by the sales that day, which that is ultimately what we want to do is we want to make sales, right? But a pop-up market is also, you want to look at the success by long-term sales too. And so one of the things you did really well is that you added a ton of people to your email list by doing the giveaway. But the giveaway also generated excitement and people coming over to your table. So I know that people probably bought from your table that day just by being there and experiencing the giveaway, right? But the third thing that I thought that you did really well is that you were able to get invaluable customer feedback through that giveaway. And I truly believe that one of the things that product makers don't do enough of is listen to customer feedback. And if anyone listening heard a couple of episodes ago, we had a trend specialist come on, Dwayne Jeffries, and he talked about when you are a product maker, you want to make a third of things that you like, a third of things that you don't like, and then a third of things that are trending and that are market trends. And so I know I'm guilty of, I really just like to make things that I prefer. And so having that customer feedback is really invaluable because you really get to hear things that customers are preferring. And so I thought that you really incorporated that well into your overall strategy. And so overall, just made it even more successful for sure.
Yeah, it really did. And you know what you said about how you want to make things that you don't necessarily like? I was so surprised that the candles that sold out first were not my favorites. I mean, I like all my candles, but those are not the ones I would choose to burn in my home per se. And those are the ones that people were just snatching up. And so I think it's so helpful to get feedback from the people that you're trying to sell to, because ultimately they're the ones that, we care the most about, not just what I like. So it was very
Yeah.
helpful information.
I've always been surprised about that. Or even the opposite can be true. The ones that I think are going to sell the quickest, and they're the ones that are still on the table, So it can just be interesting. And it just goes to show that God created us all with very different tastes and preferences. So Did you have a strategy for closing sales and ensuring customers left happy? So maybe if a customer was on the fence, did you have any kind of strategy for kind of helping close that sale?
Yeah, I think highlighting some of my favorite features of our candles, what sets our candles apart from other people. So this doesn't just apply to candles, but some markets are just saturated and you've got to have something that sets you apart from other people. And so I think really highlighting those things was helpful for people. I think there's the tactile experience of people just smelling them was really helpful. And then as far as the happiness component, as when they purchased the candle, I highlighted make sure you read the candle care card. It's going to get you the most time out of your candle, the longest life. And that to me is a way to make sure that they're getting the most use out of the product that they just bought so that hopefully they will be satisfied with it and, eventually come back to it. I also think the signage that I wanted to be minimal, not overwhelming, but also very clear in, again, the setting apart aspect so that it caused a lot of questions, people asking, what makes this different? And we had conversations. And I think those conversations led to sales because they're like, oh, okay, yes, I can see how this is different. I want to go ahead and buy.
I love that. And also talking about your signage, that was one other thing that you and I had talked about early on is making sure that you make it as easy as possible for your customers to buy from you. So how can you eliminate barriers for customers to purchase, whether that's accepting cash, accepting Venmo at a pop-up market, just any barrier to eliminate for a customer to buy. And that also includes having very clear signage at your table because some people are introverts. They don't want to have to ask how much something is.
Mm-hmm.
And so just making it easy for every customer.
Absolutely.
And
There was a
yeah,
bit of everything when people were purchasing. I loved that advice of like, make it as easy, take away any barriers. And so I had my Venmo QR code. I had, we take credit card, PayPal, Cash App, cash, all the things. And I had a little bit of everything of people preferring different methods. And so I think that was really helpful advice too.
yeah. Was there anything unexpected that you had to deal with at the market?
Yes, there were three things
Oh
that
no.
but it all turned out fine, but I think it had helped that I had mentally prepared for what is the worst case scenario that could happen and how can I be prepared for that? And I'm so glad I did because my worst case scenarios happened. And that was this wasn't worst case, but when I got there early to set up and I started having customers show up half an hour early and buying, and I didn't have my table set up yet. And fortunately, I had a couple friends who had come early to help me with the table. So they were able to kind of finish up while I'm interacting with customers. But I did feel a little bit flustered going into it. I think another thing was I had purchased a tap and chip for credit cards and I tested it at home. Everything was working great. I get there, go to do my first customer with the tap and chip. It doesn't work. And so I was like, okay, you know what? This is why I have a gajillion other ways for people to pay. And so we were able to sort that out. I had other ways. And I had a friend there actually who was in IT and he came and looked at it and he's like, you just needed to close the app down and restart it. So it was very simple, but it was one of those like, what am I going to do if people can't accept credit card? So having that was definitely unexpected. And the last thing was I misplaced my phone, which is where I was doing all of my ordering from. But fortunately, I had actually brought a backup phone, my husband's work phone, because I was doing it for the reason of what if my battery dies and I have no way to charge it, which you could get a charging block, but I just brought a phone. And I'm so thankful I did because I couldn't find my phone power and I was using his work phone. So I do think it helped that I had mentally prepared and it was like, okay, if this happens, what's my backup plan? And there were, several backup plans.
Hopefully you eventually found your phone, but
I did. It had been shoved under some shelf or something, but that was probably the worst case.
I think it's good that you just plan for everything and yeah, just have a backup plan. And also just go with the flow. Like
Yes.
it'll be okay. And most customers are understanding. But yeah, just being ready. If you're one of those that is tired of going to pop-up markets and vendor fairs and leaving feeling frustrated from the lack of sales, and you've been listening to this episode wondering how you can be successful like Mina at your next pop-up market or vendor fair, then check out the show notes for a link to my mini course, Pop-Up Market Prep. You'll get access to proven marketing strategies that are going to help you increase your sales at your next market and for months following. So check out the show notes for the link for Pop-Up Market Prep, and let's make your next market a raving success. So what are your future plans for pop-up markets? What are your plans for To Phōs Candles?
Yeah. So the solo pop-up was so successful that it definitely got me thinking, oh, I want to do some more markets. I think because I am a stay-at-home homeschool mom, it does become a little more tricky. I want to make sure that whatever markets I do seem like they are going to be profitable. You can't know for sure before you go. There's no way to know for sure. But I think that research aspect of kind of what we had been talking about, are they well marketed? Do people go to them? I have been kind of keeping my eye out for what are those markets? Where are the ones that are popping up on Instagram and people are going to and whatnot. So I don't have any current plans, but I am in the looking around phase to see which ones would fit those boxes.
And then are there any new products or anything that you're about to bring to To Phōs Candle that you want to share or that you're excited about?
Yes. So I'm very excited about, we are releasing a refillable luxury jar, and the jars are made out of natural stone, and the candle is refillable by, you melt down any excess wax in it, pour it out, and then we have pure wax inserts that go into it. So there's no waste besides, I guess, the wick tabs that are at the bottom of it, but it's very minimal waste. And I'm just super excited because they're beautiful and they're sustainable and they're clean. It just kind of is this meshing of all these passions that I have into one product. So I'm very excited about those.
Yes. And they will be released by the time this podcast episode releases. So if you want to check them out, where can my listeners find them?
Yeah, so they're on our website at tophoscandles.com. And if you check us out on Instagram too, there's links on there for how to purchase. It's To Phōs Candles is our Instagram handle. Yeah, very excited about them.
Yes. And we will put all of those links in the show notes as well. And that's To Phōs, TOPHOS, tophoscandles.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners about your journey or your business?
Yeah, I think as I kind of thought through the process of even doing our first pop-up market and what maybe the future looks like, I can't help but think about how much trust in the Lord is required, that I can work my hardest, which I do. I want to provide an excellent product. I want to work hard as unto the Lord. But ultimately, I need the Lord's blessing on my work in order for it to flourish. And so I even felt going into this market and even continuing on in business, it's a very daily surrendering to the Lord of, again, the work of my hands. Lord, please bless it if you see fit. And I think there's just so much peace that can come from that as we do our hardest, but also at the end of the day, it's up to the Lord. And so if some prospers and if it doesn't, he has a reason. We can trust his heart. And so I think just the moment by moment surrender to him has been very, very helpful and comforting. I mean, I'm only a few months into business and I'm already experiencing the high. You told me, Andy, you're like, you're going to have some very high days and some low days.
Yes.
And I'm already experiencing that. And so I think there is something special about being able to take that to the Lord. And then also just having good community that you can talk to, people that know what you're doing, that can ask good questions, that can bounce ideas off of, and who can encourage you to rest when it's time to rest, to encourage you to keep going when it's time to keep going. And I just have found that, again, only a few months in, and I've already needed my cheerleaders to be helping me. So
yes. We are not created to do this life alone, and we are not created to certainly do entrepreneurship alone. And so, yes, I am thankful for sisters like you that the Lord provides to lean on. So he's a good father. Thanks so much, Mina, for joining. And I'm so glad to have you on the She Sells Differently podcast. What a blessing you are. And I'm so excited to see how To Phōs Candles continues to grow. Thanks for joining us. And that's a wrap on this week's episode. And join us next week for another episode of the She Sells Differently podcast. Until then, I am cheering you on in all of your entrepreneurship journey. All right, that's a wrap on today's episode of She Sells Differently. Friends, it would be a huge blessing to me if you would take 2 seconds to rate and subscribe to my podcast. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Until then, I'm cheering you on in your entrepreneurial journey. See you next time.